people's daily routines, for a lot of people involved doing the crossword, the New York Times crossword. Mine does. Every morning I sit down and I open my New York Times Games app and I do the crossword and the mini and Wordle. I like puzzles. But this Sunday, a lot of crossword fanatics were shocked by the design of the crossword puzzle. So let's pull up what that looked like. So here is the crossword. You can see the clues on the side and to the bottom, and in that upper right-hand corner is the puzzle itself. Now let's take a closer look at that puzzle. There it is. John, does that look like anything to you?
It looks like one of those colorful things you put on a little stick, and then when the wind goes by, it goes woo.
That's a pinwheel.
It's a pinwheel. I'm an innocent, so that's what you mean, right?
Yeah, well, it's supposed to look like a pinwheel, but to a lot of people, it also resembles a swastika. So yeah, the New York Times got quite a bit of flack for this because this was published on Sunday, which also happened to be the first day of the Jewish holiday Hanukkah. They received heavy backlash on social media, with some critics even going so far as to say this was an intentional act of anti-Semitism. So the New York Times responded through its executive director of communications, Jordan Cohen, who said, "This is a common crossword design. Many open grids and crosswords have a similar spiral pattern because of the rules around rotational symmetry and black squares." And I'll say the person who made the crossword himself, Ryan McCarty, also published a statement before the backlash. So this was published alongside the crossword itself. And he said, "This grid features one of my favorite open middles that I've made, as it pulls from a variety of subject areas. I had originally tried to make it work in a 15 by 15 grid, but then decided to expand the grid out to a Sunday-sized puzzle with a fun whirlpool shape. Hope you enjoy." So this was the first crossword of his that was published in the Sunday Times, but this isn't the first time the New York Times has gotten backlash for this design. So in 2017, after receiving heavy criticism for publishing a crossword that resembled a swastika, the New York Times responded on Twitter, and they said, "Yes, hi, it's not a swastika. Honest to God, no one sits down to make a crossword puzzle and says, hey, you know what would look cool?" Now, I'll say, I don't think this was an intentional act of anti-Semitism. I think it was an unfortunate coincidence that it resembles a swastika. I think that the creator didn't intend for it to look like that. And it being published on the first day of Hanukkah, also an extremely unfortunate coincidence. But I will say the New York Times has, as we've seen, had this issue before. So I think they need to be more careful in what they're publishing, especially now with this recent uptick in anti-Semitism in the United States. John, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a bad time in terms of the socio-political context. People are saying it was on the first day of Hanukkah as well, which seems almost impossible that that's when they could make the mistake. But look, yes, I don't think that they did it intentionally. That's crazy. Why would you do that? It could look more like a swastika. If they really wanted just this to look like a swastika, then all the stuff sort of littered around the edge could have been cleaned up. If that's really what they wanted it to look like, I get what they're saying. If you have crossing lines, it might potentially look like that somewhat regularly. It's actually maybe impressive that it doesn't look like a swastika more often, but it is like the one shape you can't let it be. Well, I can think of one other shape. There's two shapes you can't make it look like. Just avoid that. And maybe that makes it hard to make a crossword. I have to admit, I have literally not even for 5 seconds of my life thought about what goes into the creation of a crossword. Now that I am thinking about it, it seems impossible that you can make it anyway. It seems like that'd be so difficult. But don't make it look like a swastika. I'm not saying that it's intentional, but just for your own benefit, don't make it look like one so that you could avoid this in the future.
Yeah, there's been a lot of criticism from, like Donald Trump Jr. and other right-wing figures who are now using this as evidence that the New York Times is, anti-Semitic Nazi news, which, I mean, you could just literally go back to World War II and see some of the things they were publishing about Hitler and then the lead up to World War II. If you wanted to point to actual anti-Semitism in the New York Times, I think you're more likely to find like anti-Semitism in the New York Times or Nazi adjacent things in the New York Times, when they let Tom Cotton write an op-ed.
Yeah.
But also it's funny to me that these conservatives have taken up the mantle to, to call out this anti-Semitism when they were just embracing Kanye West and his statements. They weren't very concerned about that anti-Semitism. These conservatives have no shame standing next to Nick Fuentes at one of his conferences. So it just seems like they're trying to, capitalize on this and, make the New York Times look bad. But I do think there's like a concern here. They should be more careful. Do you have any last thoughts, John?
Yeah, I feel like it would be pretty easy to avoid that. And they just give guidance to the group of people you have making them, like, just at all costs, don't make it look like a swastika. That seems like that's within their power in the New York Times. Anyway, by the way, to anyone in the chat, I know we have a big audience. If anyone makes crossword puzzles, you know what I would love? A TYT themed crossword puzzle with questions and trivia for people who've been watching the network for a while. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Maybe that's impossible to make. And if you do make it, please don't make it look like a swastika. But anyway, yes, I hope to see one of those.
That would be really awesome. I love puzzles, so I would definitely like to do that.
I love that you do it every day. I haven't done a crossword in so long. I think that's really impressive.
I was gonna say the audience was just calling you a nerd, so I was gonna ask if you liked puzzles.
I do like them. I just don't remember the last time I thought to do one. I play board games. That's the puzzle that I do, I guess. Anyway.
Okay, board games, crosswords, they're adjacent.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.